plug for Greg Garr. He's in the audience here. I've been to a number of his presentations, and they are fantastic. If you're looking for information about the natural history of San Francisco, and then also the cultural, human-made history of San Francisco, he does a phenomenal job of presenting. Probably better than I will today. As field supervisor, I'm more accustomed to being outdoors and being able to point to different things and talk about them. So I'm going to do my best to use images to try to fully describe what I do for work and our natural areas as well. My slides probably are not going to be as nice as Greg's, which is another reason to come to see Greg's presentation as well. He uses a lot of really fantastic historical images. It would definitely be worth your time and effort. So as I mentioned, I am one of 10 people that works with the Natural Resource Division. Myself, and then my boss, who is the manager of the Natural Resource Division, and 8 natural resource specialists work with us. We're tasked with managing a diversity of ecosystems, a diversity of native plant populations, and wildlife. The program started about 20 years ago now. On its onset, there were only 3 people hired. I was luckily one of the first who were hired. I absolutely love my job. I feel like I'm super fortunate to do the work that I do. Before us here, this here is an image of Sharp Park. This here is Twin Peaks with gold fields in flower here in the springtime, looking down into downtown San Francisco, Market Street here. And this is habitat for our federally listed endangered frog, the California red-legged frog. And so in brief, I'm just going to go through an outline of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to present the Natural Areas Program and talk about our division and talk about the natural areas as a whole as well. I'm going to talk about our mission statement and our management plan, go over the 7 ecosystems that we oversee, talk about the plants and animals in those, all very briefly, talk about conservation and preservation that we do throughout the natural areas, the importance of stewardship, urban trails, IPM, and then lessons learned and successes that we have had as well. So starting off, this is an image of San Francisco. This here would be the Golden Gate Bridge. The Pacific Ocean over here, and the bay here. We have 32 different natural areas throughout the city. They're primarily located in the center, the southwest, and the southeast of the city. They represent a diversity of different geologies, geographies, aspects, with varying levels of fog, drip, and sun. And they vary in size as well. Over here we have Bayview Park, McLaren Park, Lake Merced, Twin Peaks, Mount Davidson, which is just up the street from us if you're not familiar with it. We are right now, right about here. And then there's a couple of other smaller parks that are just to the south of us as well, Lakeview Ashton and Brooks Park, Bernal Hill, Billy Goat Hill, Duncan Castro, Twin Peaks, Rocky Outcrop, all of the dunes here, Interior Greenbelt, Kite Hill, Buena Vista, Oak Woodlands. I'm not going to name them all, but they're located in a diversity of different areas throughout the city, which is very important as well. It allows people the opportunity to visit them within minutes, often from their houses. And the natural areas are acreage, terrestrial acreage. We oversee 620 acres, which is 18% of the acreage of Recon Park. With Sharp Park combined, so we also have property in Sharp Park. That's in San Mateo County, it's outside of our county. With Sharp Park and the water combined, we have over 1,100 acres of acreage. And with the 8 field staff that we have, everyone is responsible for overseeing over 100 acres each. And our mission statement. So the mission of the Natural Resource Division is to restore and enhance remnant areas and to develop and support community-based site stewardship of these areas. This is again an image of from Twin Peaks looking down into downtown San Francisco. And our management plan was adopted about 2 years ago. It was passed and adopted. It was passed by the Rec and Park Commission and adopted by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. It was written about 20 years ago, and it's a 20-year plan. It details and surveys the biology, geology, and trails of San Francisco. It guides our management and our capital improvements, and it helps us to establish our priorities that we have throughout the parks as well. And then the guiding principles of the management plan, how we implement them, is that we protect and conserve San Francisco's biodiversity for future generations. We look to conserve soil and water and protect ecosystems and species, including both plants and animals. And we monitor endangered species, again, plant and animal. We look to improve access of trails throughout our natural areas. Collect seed. We collect all seed local from our local plants. We propagate them in the nursery, and we use those for outplanting in a diversity of different areas where we're doing habitat restoration. We do most of our time monitoring and controlling invasive species and environmental education. This is an image of, Lake Merced here. And then we have a variety of bumblebee, butterfly, and hummingbird. And the views of land management have changed from the past. From the past, we had limited involvement in the management of our natural areas, and we perceived that the land and nature would kind of take care of itself. Our current views are that, specifically with properties that are public, is that there's a lot more stewardship and we have a lot more involvement in ensuring that the diversity that we have remains, and we work actively at restoring it to maintain the biodiversity. And then it's very difficult as well to put a dollar figure on the value of our natural areas as well. When we look at the image here, again, taken from Twin Peaks, these are all very recent. We've been doing lots of work up in Twin Peaks recently. And on sunny weather, this is when I've had the opportunity to take the pictures. But as we all know, the property values in San Francisco are astronomical, and how do we value our natural areas? One easy way is to kind of just look at the value that they offer, plants, animals, and water. And we often need to look at it and how it relates to us, because it's very difficult to understand how it relates to animals. And for us, it's really important habitat for and opportunities for recreation, both hiking, walking, swimming, a variety of different means of boating. But these areas are also very important for education, for environmental education, and they're important for all of us. And again, because our natural areas are located in a diversity of different areas throughout San Francisco, it gives us all the opportunity to get to them, and the natural areas don't exclude anybody. And then the other thing is about culture, equity, and access to jobs. So with culture, these are our remnant historic landscapes that Native Americans saw, very similar to what we're seeing now. And then through the years, there's also cultural aspects of our natural areas that we can see. From the 1930s, the WPA work that was done throughout San Francisco and throughout the country, there are examples of WPA 30 work in several of our natural areas, and so it's very important culturally as well. And then for access to jobs, the field of habitat restoration is ever growing, and it's important for anyone that's interested in doing this type of work. There are all sorts of great opportunities to go out and do the work that we do.
They have a great conservation biology department over at State, too. You can get a degree. Unlimited jobs, too, because we've got to save the planet, right?
Yes, yes. And then there's also opportunities for stewardship and volunteers, and I'll talk about that at the very end of my presentation as well. And I'm going to go into now about the different natural areas that we have, and I'm going to talk about the 7 different ecosystems that we manage. This here is a photograph in Golden Gate Park. This is a coast live oak. We manage portions of Golden Gate Park where there are remnant plant populations that are representative of our ecological history. This is our largest oak woodland in San Francisco. We have additional oak woodlands in Buena Vista Park, at Lake Merced, and at Bayview. The oak tree is a phenomenal tree. It has an ability to grow in pretty much any soil. It'll grow in sand, clay, and loamy soils. It's the only oak tree that can sustain the salt conditions that come off of the ocean. They can grow up to 250 years. They're found from as far south as Baja California and as far north as Mendocino. John McLaren, who designed Golden Gate Park, when he designed Golden Gate Park, he located the lodge where it is because of the proximity it is to the oak grove that was there. He wanted to have his building in a location that had kind of a forested look, something very similar to the East Coast, and that's why he located it where it is. And the oak trees are also very important. They're kind of the cornerstone of our oak woodland. They can sustain up to 550 different animals and insects. Their structural diversity, in addition to the plants that grow under them, helps to support a tremendous variety of, and diversity of animals. And plants that grow under it are poison oak, sticky monkey flower, California sage, just to name a few. And then the next four images that I'm going to talk about are water-based. So lacustrine, our lakes. We have here, this image is of Lake Merced. Impound Lake here, just past this causeway is South Lake, and then on the other side of that is North Lake, and then to the other side of that is East Lake. There are 4 lakes in the Lake Merced complex, and we have 3 other lakes that we oversee in the Natural Resource Division. 2 of them we're more involved in. Pine Lake, Stern Grove, and also Yosemite Marsh in McLaren Park, and Mountain Lake on the north side of the Richmond District. Our lakes are very important to us. The water level here represents also the aquifer level, which is where we get our drinking water from. So in addition to it being an important part of our drinking water, now the PUC is using part of our aquifer in our drinking water. So in addition to this being very important for our well-being and our health, it's also very important for wildlife. All of the water features that I mentioned are. If you look at the ring of plants that are growing around here, these are tules, and then there are willow here. There's a number of other fruiting plants that grow in here as well, and these are all adjacent to other ecosystems as well. That proximity to other ecosystems is very important for supporting the diversity of wildlife that depends on these areas. And then these images here are of fresh water, and these are all of Sharp Park. This here is looking down into Sharp Park, and it shows the complexity of our grasslands intermixed with scrub. And so again, we have a variety of different ecosystems in here as well. This image here is of Horse Stable Pond. It's one of 4 ponds at Sharp Park. This here is the egg mass of the California red-legged frog. It's a threatened species, of federally threatened species, and then this is an adult of the frog. So Sharp Park is very important habitat for 2 endangered species. A federally listed endangered species, the San Francisco garter snake, resides here with the frog. We are tasked with monitoring both these animals and their habitat by the federal government. They have an interesting relationship with one another. The frog is one of the main food sources for the snake. So you have a federally listed endangered animal feeding on a threatened animal. So it puts both of them kind of in peril. 3 of the ponds are immediately adjacent to the golf course. The golf course at Sharp Park is run organically, and that's so that we put less damage and potentially do not cause harm to the frogs that are there as well. Next is salt marsh, also known as a tidal marsh. If you folks want to come in and sit down, come on in. This is very important. This is India Basin, down on the eastern shore of San Francisco, very near Bayview Park. The area here, this will flood in high tide, and this will often be brackish water, a combination of fresh water and salt water. Plants that can tolerate very saline conditions will grow here. They're very important for the wildlife that's there, part of the web of life that's there. And then they're also important in that they help to protect our coastal areas. They help to prevent erosion because they capture sediment that comes off of the land. And they also help to limit the amount of impact from the ocean and the tides. They will be challenged with climate change and sea level rise. And next, we have two riparian areas, creek areas in our natural areas. The image here on the left is in Glen Canyon. This is Esleas Creek. And then we also have another creek in McLaren Park, Gray Fox Creek. The image on the right-hand side is Creek Monkey Flower. Cardinalis. It's got a lovely red color to it. It's very different from the other monkey flower that folks may be familiar with. It's less common throughout San Francisco. The creek is very important because the creek meanders through a variety of different ecosystems. So the creek will be able to support a diversity, again, diversity is going to be a big word that I use over and over again, of vegetation. So here we have cow parsnip. In the back we have willow. Here, I'm not sure what that is. It looks like it might be mint. But we have a number of fruiting shrubs in here as well that require more water than where they would be able to sustain themselves in the immediate grasslands that are past this eucalyptus tree in the back here. So this is really important habitat because this runs year-round. It's really beneficial for diversity of wildlife that is here, because much of the wildlife lives in the grasslands that are near here and or in the shrub communities. There's a scrub community adjacent to here that's very rich and again beneficial for migratory and resident birds and a number of other mammals, vertebrates, and invertebrates. And then next is our dune system, very different from everything else that I've talked about. The image on the left-hand side here is of Grandview Park. This photograph is taken from another one of our natural areas above Stowe Lake on Strawberry Hill. And then this here is San Francisco wallflower with the city juxtaposed behind it. There are 5 parks in the dune community that are in the under our oversight, natural areas. They represent our dune history. At one point we had dunes that would extend from the Pacific Ocean to downtown San Francisco. So if you think of Golden Gate Park, and then you think of the Panhandle, the Hayes Valley, and then down to the Transamerica building, that was all migrating dunes. So these properties still represent what was once here. So again, they're part of an important environmental history of San Francisco where you can really see what those areas were like before Golden Gate Park was established and became the naturalistic park that it is now. The plants that grow in these areas are very important in helping to stabilize the soils. The soils are extremely sandy and highly erosive. So in addition to the plants also supplying important wildlife habitat, they also help to stabilize the soils that protects the houses and the roads and our sewer system down below. And then our grasslands are our most diverse and our richest ecosystems that we have in San Francisco. The two images here are of two separate grassland communities. This is Bayview Park, and this is with Waiithia, the mule's ears. And this is Twin Peaks here with diversity of different plants in here. Our state flower, the California poppy, checker bloom, this pink one here, lupin, the purple one here, and then a variety of other plants in the background here as well. And looking at this grassland community here, you can see the shrub community that's in the background as well. And then you can also see that there's a grassland community here. This is very similar, all these are similar. However, the aspect of this slope is north facing, and it allows for the growth of a very different assortment and assemblages of plants than what you find in this western growing slope. Some of the plants here, like the northern face. The other thing is that this area here is in private property, and people generally are not allowed to go into there unless you're volunteering with us, and or if you have some sort of connection with the radio tower. But it's a reason to come out and work with us if you're looking to come into an area that is very diverse and very rich. So with that diversity, usually when you have a greater diversity of plants, you in turn have a greater diversity of animals. So there's a direct relationship between the two of them. And then similarly at Twin Peaks, we have very different plant communities at Twin Peaks, representative of the variation and the difference in the soils. Both these areas are in MA1 areas, so with the management plan, and one of the ways what we have done is try to establish what our priority areas are. And the management plan, through years of surveying and work done through the various colleges, including City College, surveys were done, information was documented, and we established 3 different management areas. There's an MA1, MA2, and MA3 management area. MA1 areas look very much like these here. They have a great diversity of native plants. They have a great diversity of animals as well. If you're familiar with Mount Davidson, I'm going to kind of use that as an example. Has anyone been to Mount Davidson? Nice. If you haven't gone, you should go now because there's a beautiful wildflower bloom up there now. You've all heard about the epic wildflower bloom this year. We have that happening here in San Francisco right now as well. So the MA1 areas are very important. They have a lot of plant diversity. The MA2 areas usually ring the MA1 areas. So they're kind of protective areas that surround the MA1 areas. And the MA3 areas are the areas that are more highly disturbed. They've either been disturbed from the encroachment of invasive plants at Mount Davidson, for instance, the eucalyptus tree. There's very little biological diversity underneath the eucalyptus tree. It's primarily Himalayan blackberry and Algerian ivy. And we have a number of rare plants. So I've talked about several different common plants throughout San Francisco, and I'm briefly just going to touch on this just so that people have a full understanding of really the complexity that we have out there. This here is Chinese houses. This is one of our locally rare, uncommon plants in San Francisco. This is at Bayview. This here is taken down at Balboa Natural Area. This is Indian paintbrush. And then this is from Mount Davidson. This is San Francisco campion. We have, and it's a Silene. We have 2 of these, very different from one another, one occurring at Bayview and one occurring at Mount Davidson. With regards to our rare and uncommon plants, that's why I don't have, if I'm outside, I would be able to hit that better. All right. A very important point. So with the 20 years that our management plan and our organization has been around. This is kind of a big year for us with regards to rare and uncommon plants. We're embarking on moving forward with helping to bolster and increase the population of our rare plants in the environments that they're currently found in, and in the ecosystems that they're currently found in as well. And then most of the work we do is around plants, but the reason why we do the work that we do around plants is because of the diversity of wildlife that the plants support. So these images here were all taken in San Francisco. This little salamander, this image was taken up here at Mount Davidson. The brush rabbit at Twin Peaks, the fox in Golden Gate Park, and the common garter snake was taken down at India Basin. Our animals, those that are able to move about from park to park, don't really know about any geographic boundaries that we have. So I'm talking about the Recreation and Park Department natural areas. As you all may know, there's another very large natural area on the northern tip of San Francisco that is under the National Park Service. We don't oversee that, but it's as equally as important, if not more so, than many of our natural areas. The bigger the natural area, kind of the more important that is. Migratory birds that are going over, they'll stop here to find refuge as they're going from one location to another, as will a number of different invertebrates, including butterflies. And so I've talked about the snake and the frog, and at Twin Peaks we have the federally listed endangered mission blue butterfly. These are the eggs of the butterfly, and for those of you that are familiar with lupin plants, the leaflets and the leaf of the lupin are about that big. The eggs that are here are kind of the size of a pin in many ways. This is its larvae, the butterfly's larvae, which is about the size of my pinky nail. And then this is an adult male butterfly, which is about the size of my thumbnail. We take care of this animal and its habitat up on Twin Peaks. It's one of about 5 locations that the animal is still found in. It's found as far south as Crystal Springs Reservoir and as far north as the Marin Headlands. Its habitat is what you find at Twin Peaks. Its host plant is lupin. There are 4 different lupins that it uses: Lupinus arboreus, Lupinus formosa, Lupinus variecolor, and I just learned over the past 2 months, Lupinus arboreus is the one that I learned, but also albifrons. So the arboreus is the one that we see in many places, that's yellow flowering. If you hike in the North Bay and in the Marin Headlands, there's a variety there that has more purple-blue flowers. It has been found on both of those, which is kind of an important bit of information and change in our care for this animal to ensure its longevity and existence.
Yeah, arboreus is very common.
It's super common. It's one of the things that we're doing at Twin Peaks is improving the habitat where these plants are already found. With grasslands, it's nearly impossible, it is actually completely impossible, to recreate this ecosystem. You cannot recreate a grassland. Once you have it, best to restore it and or preserve it as best you can. So one of the things we are doing though is that we're removing native shrubs that are encroaching on the grasslands. So historically there were a number of different grazers that would eat these shrubs, and or there was fire that would come through, naturally occurring, and would burn all of these shrubs to the ground. And then the seeds that are here would be encouraged to germinate because they're very fire responsive. And then you'd have this big flush of the lupins come up, and then you'd have this bunker year of the butterfly as well. So we try to emulate that now as well, and we'll probably be using now those the Lupinus arboreus as a connector plant. And then this here represents a very interesting interaction with our plants and animals. This here is Dutchman's Pike. This image is taken at Strawberry Hill, and this is a pipevine swallowtail. This butterfly takes acids from this plant and uses it as part of its defense mechanism. The point of this slide is that if you go out to our natural areas and you sit down and you look around and you start to experience the natural area and really be present in the natural area, you'll notice a lot of interactions that are happening. Hawks will come in and they'll use the grasslands as their feeding area. You'll notice nesting birds. You'll hear birds starting to sing. If you're in their habitat, you'll notice that they're going to try to distract you. If you tip over logs or rocks, you're going to notice a number of other animals out there, salamanders, snakes, other insects. And equally as important, if not mostly important, are the health of our soils. So I have an image here of a fly agaric mushroom. Microorganisms help to break down most of the leaf litter and other organic matter that falls onto the surface of our soils. That becomes very important for the overall health of the plants that grow there. And the breakdown of the mushroom and the organic matter also helps to hold water, which also helps the plants during drought months. And part of the management plan, although it does direct us in different areas where to work, one of our biggest challenges is prioritization. And a different concept, I had mentioned preservation and conservation earlier. That earlier concepts of the word preservation and conservation were not really opposing, but they really didn't embrace the idea as much. Those words are also used in what we do for our restoration. So with regards to preservation, this is another adult butterfly taken last April on Twin Peaks with a lupin in the background. The butterfly is looking for the lupin. It can sense the color of that plant and seeks it out. This here is Mount Davidson. This is a Nootka reedgrass community. At Twin Peaks, the habitat there is very intact. Prior to the existence of the Natural Resource Division, the California Native Plant Society was actively working here and weeding here. That was decades before our program started. That fortunately did happen because it helped to reduce many of the weeds that we would find elsewhere. So then this area here is more of a preservation because it already has that phenomenal diversity of native plants. With this area here, this here has received a tremendous amount of conservation work. It was highly disturbed. And those of you who have walked up Mount Davidson, if you take the fire road that goes up, that'll bring you by the WPA stairs, which are absolutely beautiful. If you're on Instagram, you'll notice that people frequently post pictures of those stairs. But in addition, the grasses that are around there, it's our largest bunch grass. It grows above 700 feet. It's also found on Twin Peaks. It was not degraded on Twin Peaks. There's still a diversity of other plants growing with it on Twin Peaks. At Mount Davidson, this area was completely encroached by Himalayan blackberry, by Algerian ivy, and by eucalyptus trees. So it required us to remove trees throughout here and saplings to preserve this system that pre-existed. It runs along the spine that's at the cross, and it runs down to Juanita by Rex Street. If you go out there and you take a look at it, you'll see it. It's phenomenal. It's really beautiful. It's great to see it. You get a very different experience going to Mount Davidson, walking under the eucalyptus trees, which tower above you, and then you've got these grasslands beneath it, which it's not necessarily a monoculture, but it's close to, to a monoculture of grasses. And then when you walk out to the eastern side and you look at the phenomenal views, that's where you'll also see then the fantastic grasslands that are below. And so with our restoration, we also use a method that was created by two sisters from Australia, the Bradley method. And the Bradley sisters were going out into the wild and doing restoration, and they were trying to figure out how best to approach the restoration of very beautiful natural areas that they had there. And what they started to do is they started working in the areas that were most intact first, and then working out from that. So having kind of a core area that you work with, we implement that concept daily. It's a very important thing to do, and it really helps to ensure our successes as well. And then very important to us is stewardship. This is an image of Shark Park, where we're removing Cape Ivy from this area here. This is a combination of folks from National Park Service and the California Native Plant Society. We partner with the folks from the National Park Service quarterly, which is very important because it allows us the opportunity to share information that we have, successes that we have in the field, failures that we have in the field, and we work with the California Native Plant Society on a weekly basis, every Wednesday from 12 to 3 o'clock. Those partnerships are very important here as well, but we also attend a number of different seminars. Annually, someone from our staff will go to CalIPC, the California Invasive Plant Council seminar that's held throughout California, to get new information that people are discovering relating to habitat restoration. And then next, our urban trails. We have a relatively new urban trails unit under the natural resource umbrella. Our urban trails are important for safe access, erosion, habitat preservation, addressing fragmentation, and our trails. So the images that are here are of Twin Peaks. This here is the same location. This is pre-construction and this is post-construction. The trail that's being built here, originally there was a trail that went into sensitive Mission Blue habitat. We tried to care for that trail for years. It went straight up. It followed a ravine. It followed where the water went. There was always severe erosion through that area. We continued to put a lot of money and resources in it, and we couldn't keep people from going into more sensitive habitat. So in planning and with the Capital Division, we decided to reroute this trail. It follows contours, which improves access overall, and then box steps, landings, and up here there's a set of stringer stairs that go up a very steep slope and a very unconsolidated slope. It's important to control erosion in our natural areas because any erosion that comes in, invasive plants love disturbed soils. We want to limit their ability to come in if they're not already there. And then fragmentation, we have a number of social trails throughout our parks. And fragmentation, if it's a new word to you, is basically if you imagine this big block of land and then you start drawing lines on it and X's and you start separating things a little bit, you're fragmenting a whole. That fragmentation impacts wildlife tremendously. So if we have 5 trails that go up one area instead of one very well-developed trail as this here, that impact to wildlife can be astronomical. It also is very challenging for us when we're so few staff to continue managing and upkeep those areas. And then in addition, we also use IPM. So we have IPM is Integrated Pest Management. We have an Integrated Pest Management program. We primarily in the Natural Resource Division do hand removal. So that's working with hand tools, using picks, axes, and other hand tools. And in addition to that, we do mechanical control. This is me working with a contractor removing an invasive aquatic weed, Ludwigia. This is hand removal here. And then biocontrol as well. There are opportunities to use biocontrol to address many of the invasive species that we have. It takes a long time. There's a lot of research involved around it. Recently, we had midge released. There was a 20-year study that was done over at UC Berkeley Livermore Lab on a midge to address Cape ivy. It's an African weed. It's not in the ivy family, it's in the sunflower family. But it grows prolifically and it can grow in all conditions, which most invasive plants can. They're very well adapted. The biocontrol midge that's been released will keep the growth of the plant back, so it'll continue to allow the native plants to coexist with that. It will not eradicate the plant, but it'll help to keep it in check. The other thing is prevention. So I work outdoors all the time. If I go into an area where we have an invasive grass, and then I don't clean my boots off, and then I go to another park, I might move that plant around, which we unfortunately do even with practicing prevention. So really good housekeeping is very important, that we clean our boots off, we clean our tools off, we're cautious of where we go. If you're going any place in the North Bay that has sudden oak death and then you go into locations that don't have it, the possibility of moving that around are very great. The other is early detection and rapid response. So when we're out in the parks, we're always looking to see if there are weeds that we have in one location that are new to another location. And or if there are weeds that we have nowhere else and we're noticing them coming in. The earlier that we address them, the better. It means that we have less work to do long term. And then innovation and experimentation is exactly that. We try to experiment and innovate as much as possible and listen to what other people do and try not to keep our mind set on what we do, that we're trying to grow with it. And then we also use pesticides and herbicides where needed. It is one of the tools in our toolbox to address especially tenacious weeds that we're unable to remove by weeding. So I'm narrowing down to the end. I wanted to leave 15 minutes, but I'm talking longer than I thought I was going to. So I apologize for that. But lessons learned over the 20 years. This is another image from Twin Peaks. It was just taken on Tuesday when we were out there doing an herbicide application. We have footsteps of spring here, checker bloom, iris, and then you can see the different mosaic of the grasslands beyond it, and this is Mount Davidson. So one of the things that we have learned is the importance of advanced outreach. When the program first started, I mentioned that there were only 3 of us. We didn't have the resources to do outreach internally and or within the community. By the time information came out about the Natural Resource Division, some people did not embrace it. The other thing I have there is pleasing everybody. Not everybody sees invasive plants as a problem. They just see it as part of nature. So that was very eye-opening. And then also resource allocation. When we go into work someplace, to ensure that we have the resources to follow up on the work that we've already started, because we are investing so much effort on the onset, it's important that we're able to follow up on it. And then also that nature is very resilient. And so successes over the past 20 years, we have successfully created community stewardship, improved habitat for 3 endangered species. We've had the adoption of our management plan, and now we're starting the rare plant enhancement. And then successes before and after photos. This is at Bayview. This is broom that's being removed. You can see that there's even broom here that we had started the year prior. Some of this broom is, the base of them are 8–10 inches in diameter. This is the after image of it. We have a diversity of native plants coming in here now. This is Farewell to Spring growing here. And then this is Glen Canyon, Islayas Creek. This is before we did the work in Islayas Creek. 19 eucalyptus trees were removed here. This is after the goats had come through and grazed. This was all Himalayan blackberry and Algerian ivy. You basically had 3 species of plants here, and this is what it looks like now. So we again have a great diversity of plants in there, helping to support a greater diversity of wildlife as well. And lastly, I've pointed out here, I've mentioned this a couple of different times, if you would like to get involved with us and volunteer with us, we have opportunities every Saturday throughout the city at different parks, and every Wednesday from 12 to 3. I have business cards here I'll leave if you would like to grab one. And then those of you as well who are considering a job in the work that I do and or as a gardener with Rec Park, if you log on to this website, you'll be able to find information there. The position that I'm in, or the natural resource specialist, is a 3420 position. If you write that down, it'll tell you what the qualifications are to do the work that I do. And if you're interested in becoming a gardener, it's a 3417 position. And that's all that I had. If anyone has any questions. Questions? Yes?
What are invasive species of current concern for you?
There are a number. So we're actively removing Ehrharta, and invasive species we remove seasonally as well. So the idea of invasive species, you want to remove them before they drop their seed. Some of them are amazingly prolific seeders. So this is the season we're coming into now to start removing radish, because radish will produce a ton of seed. Hemlock, poison hemlock as well, mustard. But oxalis as well. So our herbicide applications now, we're spraying oxalis in a couple of different parks to ensure the longevity of our natural areas. And we're constantly looking for other ways to address that and ideally control that weed. The largest invasive we have is eucalyptus tree. And we don't have as big of problems as one would expect of those growing immediately in our rich areas, but most of our invasive plants come from the Mediterranean environment.
South Africa.
In South Africa.
And what about thistles?
Thistles as well, yeah. So Italian thistle right now, we're actively pulling that, cutting that. That's also very problematic. Yes?
So what things we should aware besides in our daily activities to prevent our best to prevent the invasion species?
So, you know, one of the things is what we buy from the nursery. So nursery trades still sell invasive species. You can buy lots of things. There's nothing governing what our nurseries sell. So number one, look to Cal IPC. They have alternatives to buying invasive plants. So don't buy invasive plants. Plant native plants in your backyard. Native plants in your backyard will benefit our ecology tremendously. Third would be to go out and experience nature and see what's there and inform yourself about what is there. Look for greater information from the California Native Plant Society and other environmental organizations. Get involved with organizations like mine and others as well. That, I think, informing yourself is probably the best thing. Yes?
I have two questions. So one is, where can we see, like, where's the best place for us to see the California bloom? And second is, referring to the question, how do you know, like, what is, like, the invasive plants?
How do you know what invasive plants are?
Yeah, like, how can you tell, like, you're walking someplace, how can you tell that's?
It is very hard to tell, and you know, our human existence is that we see things in our lifetime, so we grow to kind of see things and perceive things as Californian. You see broom growing on the side of the road and you think, oh, that's supposed to be here. So it just requires kind of doing a little bit of education. There's always lots of information. If you go to different parks throughout San Francisco, which brings this to mind. Thank you for bringing that up. I hope I have enough of these for everybody. If I could, you could grab one of these and pass it along. And I spent so much time, I can't really talk about this, but it'll be very clear on what these are. And if you don't have enough, I also have business cards here. You can reach out to me. You can buy these for $5, but you're getting them for free today. I don't sell them. We don't sell them for $5. That's they're sold by nature in the city. So it is very hard to tell what's native and non-native. So that's a hard question for me to answer. But where you can see the best local bloom right now really are in our grasslands, because our grasslands have the most diversity. You could go up to Mount Davidson, you could go to the corner of Lansdale and Dalewood and walk up and look at the grassland there, or easier, you could drive up to Twin Peaks. You can park in one of those areas, don't leave anything of value out in the open because there's a lot of break-ins there, and you can walk out and look in the grasslands there. And if you take any of the paths that are there, you're going to notice a lot in bloom right now. The north side will have more flowering because the south side, things are already starting to go into dormancy because of the sun. Yes.
How do plants help?
How do they help with the sewer system? Well, plants help to